Have the characters for Season 5 already been leaked before the release of Season 4? Well, it's starting to look that way, and this could be really exciting news for X-Men fans. Let's talk about it. YouTube, what's going on, man? It's Father Dark here bright and early on a beautiful Tuesday morning. Hope everybody's having a great start to their week so far. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So for a while now, there's been people who have been doing leaks for Marvel Rivals, and some of the people that I follow, just a few of them, like XOX Leaks and a few other different people. Pretty much every time that they say that we're getting a set of characters in a season, they've been right so far. They have a really good track record of saying, like, you know, these two people are coming. Now there has been a few people, like just one or two, that have been leaked, but they weren't ever really like saying that they were actually coming. They were just saying like they could be, but closer to the season, they're usually pretty spot on. And like, for example, White Fox, I believe, is one that they were saying was coming this season. But for the most part, the people that I follow that I'm talking about, that I say are the most reliable, they pretty much every time that they say who we're getting, that's pretty much exactly who we get. And for a while now, they've been saying that with Season 5, it was supposed to be like a love themed season, and they were saying that Rogue and Gambit were coming. Now, I didn't really put much stock into that initially, just like, you know, I usually don't. And that's something that I want to preface too. Anything that I'm saying in this video is it's just speculation. There's no guarantee that they're coming. We haven't even had Season 4 release. And like I said, this is all just speculation, but things seem to be lining up. And one of the reasons that I say that is because, as we all know, the content creators, like about a week and a half or a week or so before the new season releases, they get access to the current, you know, the new build of the game that will be coming out. And not only do they just get access to like play the characters and stuff, they get to see the battle pass and they get to see lore cards and stuff like that. And with one of the lore cards that came out called Raising the Stakes, I'll put it on the screen here for you. I'm not going to read the whole entire thing, but there was one part that really stood out to me. It said, if you play your cards right and they don't drain every last bit of your life force, I may make an appearance. And they also make reference to a playing card that they won in a game against Mephisto himself. He says, from what I can tell, I believe it contains a stolen fragment of your own chi. I consider keeping it as a trophy, but I felt it would be better off back with you where it belongs. Perhaps one day when the time comes to cash in all of our chips, you will be so kind as return the favor. Now, for those of you that don't know, Mephisto, he's basically like Marvel's version of Satan. Now, there are other characters that people could say are Satan, but Mephisto, he does like kind of basically like he's the ruler of a pocket dimension that is basically like hell. Now it gets kind of complicated with Marvel when it comes to that. You do have like one above all that is pretty much like God of the Marvel universe, but there's also a few other people that, you know, you could say are Satan. If I'm not mistaken, in a story not too long ago, they actually had a character whose name was actually Satan, and I don't know if you guys do know in the comics. You can let me know if that person is actually Satan and Mephisto is just like a close second, or if they're all kind of like versions of like the same person, but they all just kind of have their own little place that they control and stuff like that are very similar. Nonetheless, though, the person that wrote that is actually the Grandmaster. Now, if you guys remember, the Grandmaster was portrayed by Jeff Goldblum, and I believe it was Thor Ragnarok, if I'm not mistaken, the one where Thor and Hulk have to like basically battle it out. And the Grandmaster is basically an ancient and powerful elder of the universe, and he's obsessed with games of chance and skill. He's known for creating deadly tournaments such as the Contest of Champions, where he pits heroes and villains against each other for his amusement. Now, he's the one that was writing this letter, right? And like I said, he specifically says at one point, if you play your cards right and they don't drain every last bit of your life force, I may make an appearance. Now, for most people, myself included, that seems like a pretty blatant and straightforward way of saying, especially when it says with draining life force, you would have Rogue and then playing your cards right, and all the different references to playing cards, even showing a playing card in the picture, which I'll put up there now for you all, that he said had the stolen chi. Pretty much sounds like Gambit and Rogue. And with the season being themed around lovers and stuff like that, that would make perfectly good sense to me that they would have a Rogue and Gambit season. They're one of like probably the top household names in regards to couples in the Marvel universe. And Gambit has been just a fan favorite for years and years. As long as I can remember, Gambit has been a fan favorite. Rogue has also been a fan favorite. And when you put them together as a power couple, that's what you got. Now, the only other couple that I could think of that is probably probably equally as kind of like prominent when it comes to X-Men specifically would be Jean and Cyclops. Now, pretty much every video that I make, which is why I put Cyclops in the thumbnail, because I don't really want to count them out. It may be more like, wishful thinking in that regard, but pretty much every single video that I make regarding any characters that are coming out or could be coming out, one of the top comments that I get from people are them wanting Cyclops in the game. Cyclops is probably one of the most popular X-Men. He's pretty much always been perceived as like the leader of the X-Men. There's been some exceptions here and there, like when he got hold of the Phoenix Force, I believe, and pretty much turned evil for a period of time there. But still, nonetheless, though, the fan base really wants to see Cyclops in the game. Now, like I said, there hasn't really been any hints to him, but it would be sick if they gave us for once 3 characters instead of just 2, kind of like how they did back in the beginning when they gave us all of the Fantastic Four. Once again, that could just be wishful thinking. Like I said, this is all just speculation here, and some of it's just my personal kind of like hopes and dreams and stuff like that. But nonetheless, though, I do think it's safe to say that we could be getting Rogue and Gambit, and I do think that would be amazing. One of the only things that I think is interesting is how exactly would Rogue's kit play, because we already have Loki, and Loki kind of plays exactly like how I would perceive that Rogue would play in the game, because that's kind of her whole shtick, is taking people's abilities. Now, you could say, well, Loki just takes an ability for a period of time as his ultimate, right? Whereas with Rogue, I would assume she would be a flyer, because she's never had an issue flying in the comics to my knowledge and understanding. There may be some exceptions, because it just kind of depends on who writes characters a lot of time and what kind of abilities that they choose to give them, or what they don't, or whatever the case is. I think Wonder Woman's like a really good example of that, how sometimes she can fly, sometimes she can't, sometimes she has a jet, sometimes she doesn't. But with Rogue, I would imagine that would kind of be like, you would have to not make that so much an ultimate, but just implement that into her abilities, maybe make it to where she has the ability to, like, that's her whole thing, is just taking abilities. She doesn't really have many of her own. Like, maybe she has like a main little like basic attack, but for the most part, that's kind of what she could do, is just take abilities like regularly. Now, ultimate wise, I don't know. Maybe that would be how you separate it, is by taking abilities normally, like the normal abilities of a player, but then as her ultimate, she just takes other players' ultimates. But that, once again, that's really close to Loki, and they'd already said in the game, or sorry, the devs had said at one point in time that they were straying away from making characters that were too similar to other characters, which I completely understand, right? Like, what's the point of adding characters in that pretty much do the same thing as another character that's already in the game? But I am really interested to see like what they could do with her if they were to add her, and it just seems like they're making way too many direct and blatant references to Rogue and Gambit for them not to add them both in. Now with Gambit, I feel like they could do tons of stuff with his kit. As we know, his whole thing is like he can charge up matter and stuff like that, which he usually does with his playing cards that he has. That's kind of like his whole thing that he's known for. He always has the playing cards in his hand, and he can use them to do a lot of different things and stuff. But yeah, I would love to see what they would do with both of their kits. Now, one thing that I am unsure of is with the gallery cards. I don't even know exactly what we do in the game to unlock those. I usually don't read them until like I need to, like there's something relevant in it or something really interesting or whatever the case is. So I don't know if we get those like they're on a time type of thing where they release after a certain period of time, if they're all just part of the battle pass and we lock them that way, or from challenges. If you guys do know how that works exactly, just let me know in the comments. But I am curious though, because I don't know if they're actually getting like the second half of the season, like 4.5, if they're getting those gallery cards, or if that's actually the final one. Everything that I've read says it's the final one, but I don't know if it's the final one for the first half of the season or the final one in general, and there's more information to come. But like I said though, usually by the time that we've read like the final gallery card, it usually gives us a really good idea of who more than likely is coming to the game. That's kind of how we do the same thing with Daredevil and Angela, and the previous seasons and stuff like that with the characters that were coming out. So that is something that I am really curious about, and I would love if you guys let me know in the comments how exactly that works with the creators getting early access to the season, if they get the full thing for the release of the season, or if they're just getting the first half. That I am curious about. I know they only get access to the first half, like in regards to the characters and maps and all that kind of of stuff. But I just don't know if that's how it works with the gallery cards, though. But I also am curious to know what you all think. Do you think that this is just wishful thinking, that we're reading too much into it in regards to Cyclops and Gambit? I'm sorry, not Cyclops and Gambit, but Rogue and Gambit. And also, just what are your thoughts on the characters in general? What do you think that their kits might look like if they were to release, specifically Rogue? Because I think that's the one that I'm most curious about, just because her whole entire thing is stealing powers, and then we already had Loki in the game. But I know that they plan these characters out like a year in advance because they have to. They just take too much time for them to do them on the fly and stuff like that. So something I am really, really curious about, to hear you all's opinions. A lot of you know far more about this. A lot of you have a lot of better ideas and stuff than I do myself. I just, like I said, like to speculate about these kind of things because there are certain characters that I know a lot of us really want to see in the game, and Cyclops being one of those. Do you think that there could be a chance that he could come, especially with it being in a season of eternal romance and you know, the touch of love, or whatever however they stated it in the other post that I read? So like I said, let me know in the comments, though. That's all I have for this video. This was just a short one that I just kind of wanted to put out here because it was something that I personally thought was really interesting, and I don't really see anyone else breaking it down or really talking about it. But I do appreciate you all for listening. I'm Father Dark, and I'll catch you on the next one.